All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to our third Wednesday winter edition of the Garden Hour. And it definitely feels like winter across the state of Missouri, kind of dealing with some weather whiplash from some really warm weather last week to some really cold weather this week. We have some great topics lined up for you this week, some things to need to think about in terms of tasks in the garden and the landscape that might be helpful this time of year. So I'm really happy everyone was able to sign on and join with us today. Um, just to let everybody know, we're always here to help. We have horticulturists across the state, based in different regions. You can see the map there. Always happy to help you out with any questions about the landscape, garden, etc. And if you haven't seen this slide before and want to take a moment there to jot down the email address of the specialist in your county. If your county is in a designation of an open position, just feel free to reach out to someone in the neighboring county, and we're always happy to offer you assistance. So at this point, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to our moderator for the day, Jennifer Schutter.
All right. Thank you, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. We have a lot of good topics to get to today, and the first one that we're going to cover is digging and dividing perennials. There are some people that still may be wondering, can I divide my perennials? Or I forgot to dig up those black-eyed Susans I meant to in September. Is it too late to do that? So I'm going to address this question. All right, so perennial plants, like natives you see here in this photo, these black-eyed Susans, those are typically plants that we often need to dig up. They will grow quickly and spread. And this is a photo that I took at the home of a Kirksville master gardener. And these are in a bed behind her house. They look really pretty. But if you have them in an area and they're just getting aggressive and taking over, you may need to dig them. And most perennials can be moved and transplanted without much trouble. It is best to do it when the weather is cool and even a little rainy. When that soil is moist, it makes it easier to lift them up out of the ground. And it is best to do it in early spring or the fall. Now, how late can perennials be transplanted? Fall is a good time to do that, as is the spring. If you do it in the fall, you have 3 seasons for the plants to get established and build up, a strong root system before going into the hot months of summer. You can transplant them anytime before the ground freezes, but here in North Missouri, it might be a little too late. It's feeling like winter here. We had snow yesterday. It has been snowing this morning, lightly snowing. And in some areas, I believe the ground is starting to freeze. I know I've got an area around in our barn lot it's pretty hard. So I think it's starting to freeze up. Therefore, in northern Missouri, I'm not recommending people divide and dig up and divide perennials right now. I think at this point in northern Missouri, you should wait until spring. You can start doing that in March or April in northern Missouri. If you live in the southern part of the state, let's say you live in Joplin or Carthage or down in the Boot Hill, you may have time to still dig perennials and transplant them. So the answer to this question is, it really depends on where you live in the state of Missouri. Now we're going to get down to 10 degrees later on this week. And, I just don't think people up here in the Kirksville area and even over in Northwest Missouri, Maryville, ought to be digging up perennials at this time. The reason is there's just not enough time to get established before winter. So again, you want to make sure that you give them enough time to establish a good root system going into winter. And by doing this in early fall, you're going to give them winter and spring, to get that root system established before the heat of summer sets in and drought. Often we have drought during summer. And you want them to have a good root system before we go into the hot summer months. And that's all I have on this topic. If anybody has any further questions or any questions about this, you can reach out to me at the Adair County Extension Center in Kirksville.
Hey Jennifer, I just realized our weather wizard, Pat Guinan, was able to join us today. Pat, did you want to go ahead and give your weather report?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I should say. I'll get right into it and me. And I'm glad Jennifer mentioned the soil temperatures. So I went and during that interim, I was able to put up a couple of slides, indeed showing the frost line that is starting to enter parts of northern Missouri. These are soil temperatures that update every 5 minutes from the Missouri Mesonet, and you can see right on the Iowa-Missouri border, the 2-inch soil temperature at Unionville has reached the freezing mark. Of course, we're seeing these really cold temperatures. We're running 10 to 15 degrees below average over the past few days, and that trend is going to continue as we have even some very cold temperatures coming in, especially for Friday and Saturday morning. Even at the 4-inch depth, we're starting to get into the lower 30s across northern parts of the state. I would think as we see those colder temperatures over the next few days, that frost line will move southward into parts of northern, even perhaps central Missouri, with no snow cover. So indeed, these cold temperatures have already started to result in some frozen temperatures, especially across northern parts of the state. We've had 2 snow events. Snow's not unusual in November, but generally we see our first inch across the state, generally about early to mid-December. So we're running a few weeks ahead of schedule in regard to seeing our first snow event. On the left, we had a surprise snow event, a significant snow event impact parts of the eastern Ozarks up into southwestern Illinois. Look at some of these totals that people woke up to on Saturday morning in this part of the state. St. Genevieve County, these were some of the heaviest totals, 4 to 6 inches of snow on Saturday morning.
Hey Pat,
Yeah.
I just realized it doesn't look like if you had some slides that they weren't advancing.
Oh, okay.
So we're seeing the current 4-inch bare soil temp map.
Let me try sharing again. How's that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so thanks, Justin, for pointing that out. These are the snowfall totals from Saturday morning on the left, that heavy snow that impacted parts of the eastern Ozarks into southwest Illinois. Big totals, St. Genevieve County, 4 to 6 inches of snow. And just southeast of St. Louis, some reports around Belleville and St. Clair County, anywhere from 5 to up to 7 inches of snow. Highly unusual to see that much snow here in the middle part of November. Those snowfall totals did dip down into parts of Dent County, Washington County, Wayne County, 3 to 4 inches of snow. So somewhat of a surprise. Then we just saw yesterday morning, we had another snow event, more widespread, generally lighter, but overall, much of the state saw at least 1 inch of snow. So again, we're running about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of schedule with respect to climatologically seeing our first 1 inch of snow. And then some of the totals here in the bottom right indicate some of the heavier totals in parts of Lynn, Osage County, Worth County up in the northwest corner of the state. There were several reports of generally 3 to as much as 4 inches of snow, especially in parts of east central and central Missouri, some of the heavier snowfall. As Justin mentioned, whiplash weather here in November on the upper left shows that unusually warm period we saw during about the first 10 days of the month. Some days we reached in the 80s here in November. That's unusual. That's when you start setting some record highs when you reach 80s in November. But obviously we had a cold front move through the state this past weekend, and look at that temperature drop. We're running well below average. Generally, this time of year, we see average highs in the low to mid 50s. We're struggling to get out of the 30s today. So some very cold temperatures, and unfortunately, it looks like that's going to continue into the weekend. Lower left shows the drought condition. Much of the state, we've been experiencing some very dry conditions this past growing season that has extended into the fall season. And you can see the drought monitor map on the lower left here from last week showing much of the state still experiencing some moderate to even severe drought conditions. only east central parts of the state has received enough precipitation to make up some of those deficits we've accumulated over the past several months. But we still need some more precipitation to recharge that soil profile, as well as bringing those surface water supplies back to capacity, especially across southern parts of the state, where the ponds are still really low and they can stand to use more precipitation. We have seen a pattern change over the past 4 weeks. In the upper right, these are radar estimates. We've had 3 significant precipitation events since about the third to fourth week of October into the first part of November. Those have been very helpful in starting the recharge process of the soil, as well as those surface water supplies, but we need more in that regard. But nonetheless, over the past 4 weeks, anywhere from 4 to over 5 inches of precipitation, again, very helpful. It didn't help out in regard to renewing some of that grass growth because we had a very dry September. But nonetheless, it's nice to see these wetter periods start to build up on those deficits. Above average precipitation here in the lower right, showing the departure from normal. Those greens and blues are indicative of above average precipitation. So we're starting to make up some of those deficits that have accumulated since June. We're still running some deficits approaching 8 to 10 inches below average. So hopefully we'll see some wetter conditions as we go into the winter and to help replenish those water resources both above and below the ground. We are in a cold period. We've seen that over the past few days. It looks like these cold weather conditions are going to continue through the weekend. Some slight moderation in the warmer temperatures coming in on Sunday, and much warmer, better conditions, I think, temperature-wise for next week. Nonetheless, we have to get through the next few days. Highs today only 34 to 40 degrees across the state. Again, that's about 15 degrees below average. You can see those low temperatures over the next few days. That'll bring those soil temperatures down and more frozen soils, especially when we see lows in the teens. For tomorrow morning, highs only in the upper 30s, low 40s for Thursday. A cold front is moving through the state tomorrow. That's going to bring even colder temperatures for Friday morning. Look at these lows in the mid-teens across northern Missouri, low 20s across southern parts of the state. Again, some high temperatures only on Friday, struggling to reach the freezing mark. Low temperatures Saturday morning, again, lows in the mid-teens across much of the state. Very cold conditions. Highs on Saturday, only in the mid-30s to lower 40s. So we're running about 15 to 20 degrees below average. A little bit better moderation as we go into Sunday. So warmer conditions, warmer in parentheses, with highs generally in the upper 30s to lower 40s on Sunday, but we are heading in the right direction. I do want to mention it's going to be fairly windy over the next few days, so that will actually add some bite or some sting to those temperatures with colder wind chills as we go into Thursday, Friday, and into the first part of Saturday. Precipitation-wise, little to no precipitation over the next 7 days. You might see some flurries tomorrow. Today across northern parts of the state, that will not accumulate. Generally over the next 7 days, little to no precip across the United States. Obviously, that will be good news for travel as we approach the Thanksgiving holiday next week. I don't see any problems in regard to traveling across much of the country. That only exception across the Great Lakes where they could see some lake effect snows. Overall, it looks like some great travel weather with warmer weather and little to no precipitation, at least over the next 7 days. This is a forecast for next week, showing those above normal temperatures starting to enter much of Missouri as we go into the Thanksgiving holiday. That would put high temperatures as we go into next week, especially into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, highs in the 50s, lows in the 30s. Not much precipitation chances. Maybe towards the end of next week, they are indicating an enhanced likelihood of below normal precipitation as we go through all of next week. And Justin or Jennifer, that pretty much is a weather report. I will hand it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Hey, this is Debbie. And what I would like to do, Pat, before you actually take off for the rest of our time right here, I just want to say to everyone out there that Pat Guinan has been with us since the very beginning when we started the Garden Hour. We're going on our 3rd year here and we're all happy. Pat has announced his retirement. He's been 30 years at the university and we're very sad to see him go. He provides us with lots of great information when it comes to the area of agriculture and gardening. And we just want to say thank you, Pat, for the time that you've done and the commitment that you have provided to us with the garden hour. So thank you very much, and we wish you the best in your retirement.
Thank you, Debbie. And real quickly, this is very bittersweet for me. Obviously, I've really enjoyed doing the garden hour over the past few years. It's been a pleasure and a privilege being able to visit with everybody, and of course all the interactions and the collaborations I've had over the many years. I look forward to retirement, but at the same time, it's very bittersweet. I've just had a wonderful few decades here at the University of Missouri, and it's going to be an adjustment. But thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the opportunity with interacting and with the garden hour. It's been a pure joy.
Thanks. Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, moving on down our list. The next topic is wrapping trees and continuing watering trees. And Kathi is going to cover this topic.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Pat. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So tree wrapping, I'm not sure what comes to mind when you think of that, but it's not Christmas wrapping. But this is we wrap trees or we can use plastic guards to help reduce winter injury due to temperature extremes. And it's called Southwest injury or sun scald. Sun scald occurs on the southwest side of the trunk, hence the name. And this is the warmest part of the tree in winter due to the location and angle of the sun. When the sun shines on the southwest corner of the tree, the bark warms up and wakes up the cells. And when the sun sets, our temperatures can drop rapidly, as we're all very aware of. And then the cells can freeze and burst, causing bark splitting and other wounds. So this cracking and splitting, they are common symptoms. You've probably seen them. It takes a long time for a wound like this to heal over, seal over. So that leaves the tree vulnerable to insects and disease. And so thin bark trees like red maples, crabapple, ornamental cherries, they're at higher risk. And you may need to wrap those trees for 5 winters, 2 to 5 winters. Other trees, young, newly planted trees that aren't so thin barked, you probably need to wrap them for about 2 years. It just depends on how quick that bark kind of toughens up or gets a texture to it. So as a general rule, you want to get these wrapped by December, like Jennifer was talking about. In the southern part of the state, you've got a little bit more time, but where I am or where Jennifer is, you want to go ahead and get those wrapped. It's also, you want to use a lighter color wrap or a light colored plastic guard. You don't want to use a black one. You start at the soil line. I'm just showing these pictures of this damage. I've got a few more too, but as you want to start wrapping at the bottom near the soil line and go around the trunk. And then you go up to the first set of branches, and it's very important that you remove it in the spring. Insects can get underneath there and cause problems. So remove it every spring. This, I don't know if you've ever seen a tree where it's got this damage at the bottom, and that is also due to some frost or freezing. And that is the last place to develop a cold tolerance, is at the very base, and it's also the first to lose it. So I just recently saw a southern magnolia in this area that had that kind of damage. I wanted to wrap up with a picture of a pretty tree after seeing those cracked and wounded trees. And I want to, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and I'm asking Debbie if she would pop that map back up, the drought map, and just remind you again how important it is to continue watering as long as the ground isn't frozen. We, as Pat mentioned, and you can see from this map, we certainly could use some precipitation, and It's not in the forecast. So we talk about this often, and I just want to mention it one more time here, and maybe I'll mention it again in December, just to keep watering your trees and shrubs, especially evergreens and especially newly planted trees and shrubs. And that's all I have.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Debbie.
Kathy. Our next topic is covering strawberry plants. And for those of us here in the Kirksville area and probably all in northern Missouri, we are running out of time. It's going to be about 10 degrees on Thursday or Friday night. And I still need to get mine covered, and I'm going to get that done here soon. And now Katie is going to talk to us about covering your strawberry plants and why you want to do that.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right. So I'm located in St. Genevieve County. So Saturday morning was pretty shocking to wake up to that much snow that was not expected on Saturday morning. And that really reiterates that, as Jennifer was saying, we need to seriously be thinking about winter. And if we want these pretty strawberries in the springtime, or early summer, we need to think about that winter protection. So critical temperatures for midwinter cold. Strawberries are not extremely cold hardy. Temperatures 20 degrees Fahrenheit and below can result in crown and bud damage. So we want those pretty strawberries. We're going to have to protect those from those temperatures. Damage is worse when cold temperatures follow warm periods, during the winter. So, you know, we're in Missouri, and a week ago Wednesday, it was 82 degrees, and I was sweating when I was outside. And then Saturday had that large snowfall. So these ups and downs, the roller coaster weather we ride, really can make it challenging to protect our plants, not just strawberries. That snow cover that I keep talking about, if it would stick around, snow actually is an insulator and can help. But once again, we're in Missouri, and we typically do not have snow cover that lasts longer than a few days in many cases. So we've got to think about how we are going to protect those strawberries. So how we're going to go about doing that is we can use row cover, and we want our row cover weights to be at least 1.5 ounces per square yard or thicker. You can do low tunnels, so basically putting a low type hoop and putting those covers over that, or floating row covers. This picture is the commercial strawberry producer that has what we call floating blankets or floating row covers. And you can see some empty spots in the center of that where some of their row covers have blown off or have taken off. So they have to watch those and make sure that you replace those covers if we do have wind events. Those covers reduce the evaporative cooling and heat loss. So that's why they provide that protection. Another method, easier sometimes for homeowners and small strawberry patches, is 4 to 6 inches of clean straw mulch. And we typically think about mulch in between rows and around plants. But in this case, we are actually putting it over the top of the strawberries. We are covering those plants. And in some cases, you can use both. What works in your situation for your winter protection. Timing for this, as Jennifer mentioned, a lot of times we mulch after the ground is cold, and typically that can be late November to December, but the weather this year is showing us differently, and those covers need to go on before we get these really cold temperatures that seem like they're going to hang around for a little while here. So that's the basics of providing winter protection for those strawberries. And don't forget, in the springtime and watching those temperatures, don't uncover too early, or you may need to recover them depending on what our Missouri weather does. Are there any further questions?
Okay, thank you, Katie. Now we're going to turn to leaves, and Manoj is going to talk about managing leaf litter, mulching leaves, and leaving leaves in your beds or on the lawn. So Manoj, we'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, let me pull up my presentation here. All right, so this is the time of the year, right? We wonder, where do we get these all kinds of leaves on our house, and how many silver maple trees we have. So trees are wonderful. Fall leaves is wonderful, but when it's falling underground constantly, never ending game, then you wonder, how do I manage this best? And so we're going to talk about that a little bit here. First of all, when we say leaves management, there are different areas in our house, under the trees, under flower beds, maybe in our vegetable garden, and on your lawn. So these different areas of your house, the leaves falling, has to be managed differently. And let's start off with the leaves falling on your lawns. Okay, first of all of us know that when there is a thick layer of leaves on our grass, grass actually cannot harvest enough sunlight, and therefore this grass will not be able to produce enough carbohydrates from photosynthesis, and therefore the overall health of our turf grass is affected. So it can bear a little bit of scattering of leaves, but if it is too much, too thick, then we need to manage that. So how do we manage leaves on our lawn? Very traditional method, we all know that. Collect the leaves, bag it up, and then toss that. There are some city we like to take those leaf bags to compost peat, but also many do that to the landfill site. So when those leaf ends up in your landfill sites, then it does more harm than good. Not only you have thrown away all that good things about your leaves, that it has organic matter, nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but also you are taking up the space in our landfills. There is a lot of greenhouse gas emissions from that dry leaves. All that bad things are happening anyway. So this is the least desirable method of managing lawns for sure, when we speak of how to manage your leaves on your lawn. So I will try to stay away from these as far as possible. So what are the alternative methods that we can think about and that we recommend on managing leaves? One of the methods is mulch mowing. Many of you might have heard of these, but mulch mowing basically is running mowers over your yard to just tear that leaves down, shred it down to tiny pieces about a nickel size, and then let those shredded leaves filter into the turf canopy in a natural way. So when you break those leaves with a mower, because of its size, now it can naturally incorporate into that turf canopy, and it does more good to your turf health. It does not impede the sunlight. It builds organic matter. You are returning back that essential nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium that your leaves had. So this is more of a natural way of doing it, putting those things back to your turf canopy. But what you can also do is you can chop them down with a mower and then collect those shredded leaves using a bagger attachment on a lawnmower, and use those collected chopped leaves for other alternative use. Okay, it does not necessarily have to go to your turf. If you have other needs, you can use them for other alternative needs, other landscaping needs in your house. And let's talk on that. What else you can use those? And first thing that comes in our mind is compost, right? If you are managing compost bin, then you know that how much brown matter you need on that compost bin, because you have been putting down all those green materials throughout the summer and fall, and you are searching for that dry brown matter. And here you have leaves, which is free on your house, and that you can put down in your compost bin. And that brown material that you get from this leaf litter, it's so important to maintain that ratio between green and brown, to provide that aerations to your compost. So it's just a treasure in your compost bin, to be honest. And other than compost, where else can you use those leaf litters? Mulching on your garden, on your vegetable garden, on your flower beds. You can apply about 2 to 3 inch layer of those leaf litters. Either it's shredded or not shredded. You can incorporate into the soil as well every 2 to 3 weeks, or until your soil is too wet or too cold. You can keep doing that, collect leaves, and then use it as a mulch. And another areas you can use is, of course, under the trees. Your trees also needs mulching for that winter protections, for that soil conservation or soil moisture retention. You can put it around that mulch ring and provide that protections. Now, I want to touch a little bit on this somewhat untraditional concept, which we call leave the leaves, and this has been gaining attention recently. This fall, leave the leaves, we can see a lot of those kind of messages across the blogs and newspaper articles. So what is this about is, you know, in the nature, especially in the wild forest, all those leaves that falls from those trees in the forest, they are naturally working its way to create that wonderful habitat for all kinds of creatures. And we can somehow mimic those kind of environment in our garden as well. When you do not disturb the leaves, it provides natural habitat for lots of invertebrates, including butterflies, moths, beetles, mites, spiders, and etc., etc. Those invertebrates are getting a lot of advantage or benefits from those undisturbed leaves, because they not only provide that protection from cold, freezing temperature, but also they provide food source, as they are rich in carbon, and also some of these prey invertebrates use these leaf litters as a defense mechanisms to camouflage or to defend themselves against the pre-vertebrates, for pollinators, butterflies and bees. So if you can manage the garden or the space in your house, like the picture shown here, which is perennials and ground covers, then you don't have to do anything to take care of your fallen leaves. It will just be good leaving it as alone. Now, other thing that people have the questions in mind is whether to shred these leaves or not to shred these leaves. Ideally, if you do not shred the leaves and leave it as it is, especially for these not as big leaves, but for the oak leaves mainly, then you are not killing these eggs and larvae or cocoons of these invertebrates. Generally, the small tiny creatures, they like to overwinter in these leaves as cocoon or eggs. And so if you are not shredding, then you are actually not killing and not damaging those creatures. But if you are concerned about that timing of decompositions, it takes time to decompose, then better than disposing these litters away from your house, it's best to manage it inside within your house, whether it's in a compost bin or in mulch or garden beds and things like that. And if you have to shred, then you might also be better off doing that. And what we see is people generally tend to do it early in the season. Just they want to clean up neat and tidy. And by doing so, what you are doing is you are removing the food source for a lot of these creatures. So if you want to protect the habitat, if you want to promote this growth of invertebrates, then you may have to wait it until late in the season so that they can keep getting that food source and habitat for a longer extended period of time. Another thing I want to point out is there is no research that supports the idea that these leaf litters will have negative impact on perennials when you use them as a mulch, or there is no studies that says the disease, mainly the fungus and bacterial disease on your leaf, could transmit to your perennials and other gardens areas. So there is no reports that suggest that. So you should be good to use those as a mulch. Having said that, I'll just want to point out that be creative on ways of thinking and managing this leaf litters in a more natural and sustainable and environmental friendly way. Thank you. With that, I'll hand this over back to Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Manoj. And now Eli is going to talk about planting garlic.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let's go ahead and get this pulled up. Everybody can see that, I imagine?
Yes, I can.
Great. So this is a concept that was introduced to me by a goat farmer. Boy, it must have been 20 plus years ago. About planting your garlic now, planting it late in the fall. His idea was you could plant it up until the ground froze, which we know in Missouri, starting to get some cooler temperatures in our soil. But this same farmer explained to me the wisdom of soil in Missouri in the winter. You either have mud or you have frozen mud, and we know that the temperatures change. But with his idea, then there's this great research that was done down in Southwest Missouri in 2016 to 2018 about different planting dates for garlic. And this research, unfortunately, isn't conclusive to come up with a specific planting time of the year that is the very best. But they looked at elephant garlic, hardneck and softneck garlic varieties at over 2 different sites over 2 different years. And they planted 3 times in the fall and then once in the spring each year. And for all of the fall plantings, for the majority of them, they had good yields, and they also even got yields in the spring. And so this research shows that you can still continue to plant garlic now. You can plant it until your ground freezes. A couple tips about planting garlic. And we know this isn't the ideal time, but it's still, you can still do it and still get a crop next year. If for some reason you are too late, you don't want to have frozen fingers while you're out planting your garlic, you can keep the garlic, put it in the fridge for at least 8 weeks over the winter, and then plant it in the spring, and you will get some yield, but not as good as if you were to plant it now. And this won't be as good a yield as if you would have planted it a month ago. But this is better than nothing. I have some issues with space in my garden, so I have to wait until I get a hard frost to kill my hot peppers. And now that I've had it, I have space that I can open up and put my garlic in. But here's a few tips about planting garlic. You want to break up the bulbs pretty much the day before you're planting. You don't want to peel them. You want to plant large, healthy cloves from large, healthy bulbs. You're going to plant them basil plate down 2 to 3 inches apart, maybe 6 inches between if you want them to size up. And you can plant them closer, 8 inches between rows, but if you plant them 12 to 8 inches, it'll give them plenty of space, especially in a commercial situation. So yeah, I'd like to encourage all those folks who are like me, who are maybe get things done at the last minute or short on space, or thought they weren't gonna be able to get their garlic in, to go ahead and get it in now. All right, thank you guys.
Thanks, Eli. Our next topic is pruning flowering shrubs with Debbie.
Yeah, I had someone just the other day ask me, when is the best time for me to prune my Rose of Sharon? It's gotten unsightly, it's gotten overgrown, and they really want to prune it back. And she thought she could do it right this minute. And so I informed her, and I thought that it probably was going to be a good idea to visit with you guys about pruning your flowering shrubs. So generally the rule of thumb is that it really depends upon the plant itself, and most in particular when the plant actually blooms, and that is a true indicator of when we're going to prune our shrubs. So if you have a bush or shrub that blooms in the spring, such as the lilac, and that's a really pretty lilac, and I have boomerang lilacs in my front yard. They have this beautiful scent and they bloom in the spring. Those flowers actually are growing on last year's growth. So you want to prune your spring flowering bushes and shrubs after they have completed their bloom in the springtime. That enables the plant to have a lot of growth over the summer. And then towards the end of summer and the beginning of fall, they're actually setting the buds for the flowers for next spring's growth. My bush right now, it's overgrown. Boomerang actually blooms twice a year. The second flush isn't as prolific as the first flush of blooms. And I just didn't get there in time to prune because of my busy work schedule. So examples are, besides the lilac, are going to be viburnum and the forsythia. Forsythia is always the first one that I think of that blooms in the spring. So what do we do when it comes to our summer blooming shrubs? And here's a really pretty flower on a rose of Sharon. And they can come in multiple different colors, the flowers as well. These flowers actually bloom on the current year's growth. So the best time to prune a summer or fall blooming shrub is to do it in late winter, early spring. So to do it in February actually isn't too early for our summer blooming and our fall blooming shrubs. Examples of those are Rose of Sharon, the Japanese spirea, hydrangea, the beautyberry, crepe myrtle, butterfly bush. A lot of our summer blooming plants that are out there are just simply gorgeous. So you want to make sure that you prune those late winter to early spring. There are a few exceptions that we need to take into consideration. So this is a flowering Japanese quince picture. Actually, to note, this one here actually blooms, as well as the pyracantha. They actually bloom on 1 year's growth. So the plant will actually have a branch that comes out and grows. You don't want to prune that bush or that branch off. The next year is on that 1 year growth is where those flowers are setting its buds. So you never want to prune all of the bush at one time, because then you're not going to have any flowers for that following year. Most of our quinces are going to bloom in late spring. So let it go ahead and bloom, then prune some of that back, but don't prune all of it back. Otherwise you won't have that growth. So it's always good to look up your trees or your bushes to know exactly what it might be. And then also another reason why we might want to go ahead and prune our shrubs and bushes is that if they become truly overgrown, this is the lilacs that are in my front yard. I took this picture just this morning. So this really needs to be rejuvenated. And so even though it blooms in the spring, I don't want to prune it until after the bloom is done. However, if it's unsightly or if it's gotten out of its shape or if it's just overgrown, go ahead and prune even those spring blooming flower or bushes in late winter and early spring, noting that you probably are not going to have any flowers for at least 1 to maybe 2 to 3 years. So just keep that in mind. So the purpose of pruning back is to get it back into shape, back into its space where it belongs. So remember to prune then in the late winter and early spring. It will help to also rejuvenate the plant for its good growth so that you can actually put it back to when it's supposed to be and the beauty of what it's going to present for all of us. And I believe that, then we have the non-blooming shrubs, or they might have small blooms that are really not what that plant is noted for. But we have shrubs that are out there that we would like to have just simply because of what spectacularness they might have in a different off season, such as this red twigged dogwood bush. Very pretty in the fall and in the winter after the leaves fall off, and during the winter time, and they're very striking against a white snow background. And that's one example. And when you prune these, will also be in late winter and early spring. That's what I have for this. Thanks.
Debbie, there's a question in the chat. How far down can you prune a butterfly bush and hydrangeas?
I'll be honest with you, I've never grown a butterfly bush, so I'll let one of my colleagues answer that for you. But when it comes to the hydrangeas, you can prune those all the way down to the ground, certain species of those, because they are going to bloom and grow right back all the way up. And I'm thinking of the ones that have the big snowball type of a flower on it. That's what I normally do with my hydrangeas. Does anybody have any other comment about the butterfly bush?
I do. So we have a butterfly bush on the east side of the Adair County Extension Office in Kirksville. It's been there for several years, and it is not, so butterfly bushes are not real hardy in northern Missouri, but in the location it's at on the east side, it has survived and it's done well, but it dies back, totally like dies back to the ground. And in spring, I cut all the dead growth off. So I'm cutting it back nearly to the ground. And then it all grows back on, puts on new growth, and it flowers on new growth. So that tells me that I think no matter where you live, you can cut that butterfly bush down to the ground. It's going to grow back and bloom on new growth. Anyone else want to add anything?
I agree on the butterfly bush. You can prune it all the way back. Hydrangeas, I will say it really depends on what kind of hydrangea you have. So definitely make sure you know which one.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to move on to holiday cactus. It is tis the season for them, and Kelly is going to talk about the different types of holiday cactus.
All right, now let me get this pulled up. Okay, can you see that, Jennifer?
Yes, I can.
All right, so let's talk about holiday cactus. Well, maybe if my computer will work. Okay, did that change? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so 'tis the season for holiday cactus. I've been seeing a lot of them show up in stores. It is a great plant to kind of liven up your house this time of the year. And let's talk a little bit about how to grow them, because they can be pretty easy to grow. And so we typically see 3 different types of holiday cactus. We see the Thanksgiving, the Christmas, and the Easter. Thanksgiving has the more pointed edges on the leaf, as you see here. And then Christmas is kind of somewhere there in the middle. The leaves have a little bit of pointiness to them, but then Easter, they're almost totally smooth. And then there are some variations in flower shape and color as well. So the thing that I love about holiday cactus is that they are plants that are often passed down as family heirlooms, as we can see in this picture here. Now, this was just a picture that I found on the internet, but I've had so many stories from people that have come in my office or I've talked to that have either a plant that belonged to their grandmother or their great-grandmother, or they have taken starts from that plant and started plants of their own. And there's just some other pictures of people with their prized plants, and it just makes them all more special if they come from a family member. Okay, so these holiday cacti originate from rainforests of South America, and they're found kind of naturally occurring on trees and rocks, anywhere where there's a crevice where they can take hold, and they thrive in filtered light and high humidity. They are an epiphyte, which means they grow on the surface of other plants, and they take its moisture and nutrients from the air, rain, and other debris that accumulates around it. So basically the care is the same for all 3 types. They actually thrive a little bit more on neglect than a little TLC. They don't like to be fussed with quite a bit. So you want to start with just a good potting mix. Make sure that it's well drained, but it will need to hold a little bit of moisture as well. So those are the main things. Keep it evenly moist from spring through summer, but you can allow it to go dry between waterings from fall to spring. When new growth starts to occur in late winter or early spring, you can fertilize monthly through the summer, but you only want to use about a 1/4 strength of what is recommended for the type of fertilizer that you're using. Give your Christmas cactus high light during the winter, but indirect or filtered light during the summer. Too much direct light can cause damage. Okay. Don't expose these plants to freezing temperatures. Often, if they find a place in the house where they're growing and they're doing well, just leave them alone. They don't like to be moved around quite a bit. So they do like humidity, and you can achieve this by using a pebble tray. And you can see that here in the photo. It's just a tray with pebbles on it, and you add water to the pebble tray. And as that water evaporates, it provides humidity for the plants. Now, sometimes people fall into the trap of constantly repotting their house plants, and sometimes that's a good thing, but in the case of a holiday cactus, it doesn't need to be repotted, okay? They actually like it to be a little bit root bound. You can repot every 2 or 3 years, even back into the same pot that it was in. Just make sure that you put fresh soil in there, and that it'll be just fine with that. And then if you start to get woody stems on your plant, that just indicates that it's healthy and that it is aging very well. Okay, so as far as blooming, so to encourage those flower buds to form, you need to let the soil dry out between waterings in late summer. Move your plant to a brighter, cool location. And holiday cactus will need cooler conditions in fall in order to set those flower buds. So Christmas and Thanksgiving cactuses require about 6 weeks of short days to bloom. So they are day length sensitive. The Easter cactus requires about 8 to 12 weeks of those short day lengths to bloom. A sharp difference in temperatures, water scheduling, or light intensity can cause holiday cactus to drop buds. So again, if it's happy at a spot in your house, leave it there, and don't try to move it around. So pruning and shaping, pretty easy to do. You just want to give the stems a quick twist between your fingers, and those segments will break off. You can also use a knife or sharp scissors, and remember, each of those segments can start a new plant, so you can pass those on to other people. And propagation, very, very easy to propagate. You can either do it by sticking a cutting down in water, you can stick it down in soil, or you can even lay it on top of the soil and it will root that way as well. Very, very easy to do. And again, one of the other things that I love about these holiday cacti is just the differences in flower colors and shapes. And so if you like these, definitely experiment with different types, and they also make great gifts as well. And these are just some more photos of how beautiful they can be when they are in full bloom. And I noticed that mine is starting to put on buds right now. And so hopefully we'll have some nice blooms this year. And Jennifer, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And now Katie is going to talk to us about a survey.
So you may have noticed in your email reminders today that there was a link to a survey about the garden hour, and also have previously sent out emails about the garden hour survey, which I am putting also in the chat box. We'd really appreciate it if you would fill out this survey so we can continue to offer you the garden hour, and we want to know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see continued, or what you'd like to see more of. So this will help us out for next year. So please fill out that survey for us.
Okay, thank you. And we're getting close to wrapping up, but before we do, Debbie has a horticulture term that she would like to explain or discuss with us.
All right, so I have the term here for you. It's called stratification. And so, Jared, if you could put up the poll, please, for me, I'd appreciate it. So the definition of stratification: is it A, the need of cold temperatures for a seed to sprout? B, the name used to describe when branches cross each other in a tree? or C, the layering of soil when you're planting? Okay, we got some answers are coming in. What about some others? You guys want to take a guess at something? Don't worry, it's anonymous. Okay, we ready to go for an answer here? Okay, so I'll go ahead and share the results. So about 80% of you say A, 7% say B, and 13% say C. So let's see what the actual answer is. And I'm trying to get rid of the poll there. The answer is it's the need of moisture and cold temperatures for a seed to actually sprout. So some of the seeds, depending upon they are, predominantly with a lot of our perennial seeds, especially native plant seeds, their seed coat may be a little bit extra thick. And so it might take a little bit more than just a normal, like a normal seed would just sprout. These seed coats really need to have perhaps something a little bit extra done to them. So stratification actually means where you're going to pre-treat the seed to kind of break that dormancy, to do something to that seed coat. And it can either be dry or moist stratification. If it's a dry stratification, what that means is that that seed needs a certain amount of specific temperature or below a specific temperature in order for that seed coat to kind of break or wear down. And then it can actually start to grow once the temperature gets back up to where that seed is actually able to germinate. We also have what is called the moist stratification, and that's where it actually needs some sort of moisture as well as those cold temperatures. We can actually do this on our own. We don't have to set them all outside in order for those seeds to break dormancy. You can take a moist paper towel and put your seeds on that paper towel, fold the paper towel over it, put it in a Ziploc bag, put it somewhere in your refrigerator for a set amount of time, and that will actually break that dormancy. So knowing what the seed is that you're trying to grow can help you to determine how long of that cold dormancy and how many weeks it might actually take with that temperature. There is another one that's called scarification, and that actually is where the seed coat again might be a little bit tougher or thicker, and it needs something to actually scratch across that seed in order for moisture to enter into the seed for it to start to grow. So you can actually do that yourself as well, where the seed, you can scratch it with a little bit of a sandpaper or a nail file just to wear down that seed coat just a little bit so that the moisture can get in there. Normally, these two types of scarification in particular, and with stratification, but in particular scarification, a lot of times the seeds will go through an animal's digestive system, and that might be enough to actually scratch that particular seed. And when it comes out the other end of the animal, then it's there and it can actually start to sprout once the temperatures get to where that plant is actually able to start growing. So you guys did a nice job for today. Good for you.
Thank you, Debbie. And now we'll turn it back over to Justin to close us out.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, everybody, for presenting all the great topics today. Sorry about that. Give me just a second. So we know we put a lot of info in that chat box, stuff that you might want to come back to later for reference. So if you hover over these three little dots here, you can pop up a little window that says save the chat, and then you can always come back to that for future reference. We are streaming live on YouTube. So if you like to join that way, that's an option as well. And then we do archive both the full garden hour as well as kind of highlight snippets for the week on that YouTube channel. So definitely be sure to check that out and subscribe. We're on our winter schedule, which is the third Wednesdays We do love receiving your questions, and you can do that at this website. And so you can input your information there. You can upload pictures, and we really like getting those pictures. It kind of helps us understand, what's going on across the state with plants and landscapes, and how we can bring good information in a timely manner. As always, we definitely appreciate you sharing the garden hour with folks that might be interested. So, be sure to tell a friend to tune on in to the garden hour. And once again, we're always happy to help you out. Across the state, we have a great team of horticulturists that work together to help folks with their gardens, with their farms, with their landscapes, and get them all the information. Feel free to take a moment there to jot down your horticulturist if you need to do that. And we definitely really appreciate everybody joining us as always. Stay warm out there, and we look forward to seeing you soon.